Jim Jordan fails the second ballot. The world is on fire. Is this good for our party? Is this good for our country? We ask our friend who joins us now, Hogan Gidley, once again with us on the Annie Frey Show, America First Policy Institute's Senior Advisor for Communications, as well as the former Principal Deputy Press Secretary for the Trump administration. Hogan, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us today.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much for the time.
I'm kind of hoping that you're like, Annie, calm down. They know exactly what they're doing, but it looks like a crap show in the House of Representatives right now. So tell me what you think about what they're doing and if this is the right move.
Annie, calm down. They know exactly what they're doing.
Slow clap
is that
for
convincing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take
convincing?
anything right now. Back it up. Tell me what you got.
Listen, I don't know that I'm quite as doomsday as everybody else on this.
Okay.
I think there are obviously some realities that exist where, in order to be elected speaker, McCarthy had to give a lot to, some factions within the caucus, within the party. At the time, we praised a lot of those things because it held his feet to the fire. Now, we could argue that was kind of a systematic, strategic way to end up ousting McCarthy at some point. And whether you love Matt Gaetz, hate Matt Gaetz, love McCarthy, hate McCarthy, we are here now because of that deal that was cut early on. I like the fact that both Jordan and someone like Scalise were basically saying, look, we don't want the job, but I feel like somebody needs to step up, and I guess we'll do that. It has a very George Washington type feel. I'm not comparing them to George Washington, so everybody relax. But I do think it is important to note there are a lot of people who are reluctant leaders who don't feel as though they want to get involved, but situations force them to be. And I like that. It's a very Mr. Smith goes to Washington type mentality of, I'm going to sacrifice and serve even though I don't want to because I feel like the country needs something, okay? So I do like that. But what's going on behind the scenes, it's not doomsday, as I said, but it's getting close because sooner or later we need to get this thing solved. Now, I would also say by the time 2024 gets here, everybody's like, it's going to ruin our chances. No, it isn't. If we get our act together here by the end of the year and get some stuff done and make some good strides, we'll be just fine because – Republicans by our nature are more individualistic. I give speeches all over the country, and people ask all the time, why can't we ever be on the same page? I'm like, well, by our nature, we question things. We want to work in different silos. We have different ideas, and we respect all ideas, whereas Democrats just move together as one ignorant mob. They don't care. That's why the left is always trying to put people into boxes, put people into groups, so they can push and pull those groups as they deem politically expedient. We're a little bit different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, politics is a team sport. So our team needs to get on the ball here and figure out how to operate together, get the most conservative person you can get in there who can still build consensus with the majority of the party and with the left on certain issues where they can. And if you can't, at least put the Biden administration and the left in a box. That's what we also need, too, to kind of expose the ridiculousness and the horrible policies from the Democrats as well. And right now, we don't have a leader to do that because they haven't elected a speaker.
Yeah, and they got to get to it. We're speaking with Hogan Gidley right now. We talked a little bit, mentioned yesterday on the show, the America First Policy Institute, because we were talking about how I think Matt Gaetz kind of has a MAGA Trump adjacent air about him. I think people who especially don't pay a ton of attention will just think that Matt Gaetz is in the Trump camp of things. And what I think that might be happening here is what Matt Gaetz appeared to be doing is kind of trying to drain the swamp a little bit, to push back against people who are willing to make political promises that they don't intend to keep, because that's how the swamp continues to function in Washington, D.C. And what I hear people saying is that Matt Gaetz, they kind of agree with why he did it, but they don't agree, or excuse me, what he did, but not why he did it. And that if we're going to go in and pull the rug out from everything, we need to have a plan for what happens after we've removed the first rug. And I think people are maybe getting a little concerned that the idea of Trump going in and draining the swamp, that you can't pull everything out of the swamp if you don't have a plan to get everything taken care of upon that first action, which is where the America First Policy Institute really does come into play to say that we do have a plan, a day one plan. And Hogan, you're a big part of that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So let me talk about the speaker's analogy real quickly, and then I'll get more into that. I don't know what happened with the quote-unquote deal that was made. I heard that they didn't pass the bills that needed to be passed or didn't have the votes that needed to be voted on the floor that Gates had negotiated. But then I also heard Gates did his best to sink those privately so that then once it got to the floor or didn't get to the floor, he could say, see, McCarthy didn't come through on his agreement. Okay? So I don't know what's true here. But the fact is, time and time again, as you know, we get up to these spending cliffs, and then all of a sudden, all of us on the right have to just suck it up and go, okay, we don't want to default. We don't want to raise the debt limit. I guess we're going to have to go ahead and jettison all of our principles and all of our convictions and just vote with you guys and let the swamp keep continuing. That I don't think is sustainable. And I think Gates and some of the Republicans did a good job exposing that problem and then also holding the leadership's feet to the fire. At the same time, what do you do when you get into office and you start to move things around? Trump was not served well by a lot of people, as many in your audience will understand and remember. But look, on day one, Joe Biden signed, in the first 48 hours of being president, I think he signed 19 executive orders. Trump signed one. Biden had 1,500 people employed on day one. Trump had 500. They just simply weren't ready to govern like the left. So at the America First Policy Institute, we took a look at what happened in the past. And it's not just necessarily about the who, like who's going to be involved. It's the what and the how. Because most of the people at our organization either worked for a previous administration or were cabinet secretaries who understand what it takes to actually implement these policies, what it takes to identify problematic employees way down in the bowels of some of these three-letter agencies and then get them out. So there are a couple things at play here where you have to get a functioning government, sure, but let's be honest, it's clearly bloated. And there are people involved in a 3 million, 4 million person roster that operates under the federal government's banner all across this country. And any one of them, as we now know with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, can work to erode or stop a president's agenda. They weren't elected. They didn't get any votes, but they'll do it. So finding out and understanding what happened in the past is key for any administration moving forward so that we can help them prevent a lot of the subterfuge that happened behind closed doors. We now know where it was. We know how it existed. And again, regardless of the nominee, we're going to be ready to fight back on day one.
We're speaking with Hogan Gidley. He is the Senior Advisor for Communications for America First Policy Institute. I encourage you to check them out and their plan online. It is ready to go and ready to fire off. Hogan, when you were watching what's going on with the Republicans in the House, it's a very easy thing for the Democrats to criticize. And I want to highlight something you said a little bit before about the way the Democrats move. I hear a lot of people in the media criticizing the Republicans for not being as united as the Democrats. And I often think to myself, it seems like it's a little bit more difficult to be a principled conservative Republican than it is a principled Democrat, because for Republicans, it seems like it should come at least from the bottom up. From the Democrats, it's very top down.
Oh, no question. I mean, they have their talking points, their marching orders that start in the morning every day, and they say them. But also understand some of it is a little bit of a fallacy in this way. Because the left controls all the levers of power and influence with Hollywood and big tech and colleges and universities and the media, whenever those talking points are kind of issued, whenever they're lapped up and learned by the left, they're parroted all day long. So it appears as though there's never any dissension there, that they are all on the same page. We don't have that same apparatus to actually push forth our message and our agenda, right? So the left covers up the malfeasance from three-letter agencies weaponized against the American people. Certain citizens they prosecute, certain ones they protect. They can push all that. They can cover up any dissent about real scientific data showing the COVID vaccines don't work, masks don't work. They can operate in a way that pushes them all in the same direction. So if the marching orders come out that Hamas seems to be like some pretty good folks, just a little bit misunderstood, that's what you're going to hear, okay? Because that's the way they operate. We obviously are much different. We don't have the luxury of the mainstream media being on our side. The bar is higher for us to clear. That's a shame, But that's just reality. And that's why I think Trump was kind of significant in that way, because he didn't care. And they hate him because he went around them. He went right through Twitter, talking directly to the American people. You didn't have to guess what the President of the United States thought or hear it through a surrogate or through a nightly newscast anchor. You got to hear it directly from him. They hate that on the left and in the media because they can't color it in any way. It's exactly what he was thinking any given time. Now, that doesn't necessarily always mean that's helpful from a comms standpoint, speaking as a comms person. But it is interesting that the American people got that, and they don't get that anymore. They don't get that now because the media and the left are so interested in maintaining and gaining political power that they'll shut up, they'll silence, they'll censor, they'll shadow ban anybody who dares threaten that grasp on power.
Last question for you. We're speaking with Hogan Gidley right now. You've spent a lot of your recent years adjacent to the Trump campaign, to the Trump administration. So I'd imagine that you've been kind of taking the temperature on the American sentiment towards Donald Trump, and the passion from many people certainly has been there and has maintained. What do you think right now? I'm looking at the RCP averages here. Trump has 44.1% over Biden's 43.7%, so it's a Trump plus 0.4. That's just kind of shocking considering that the approval rate of the President Biden is disapprove at 55%. Is he going to be able to continue to bring people in, being the polarizing figure that he is?
Well, yes, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. Now, just think what those numbers would be if, in fact, the media covered Biden just responsibly, didn't have to dig into the Hunter Biden laptop or anything, just they actually covered the domestic policy that have ruined the lives of so many, the international policy, the foreign policy that have allowed wars to break out all over the world. If they just covered that, I mean, the chasm would be fixed and immovable and quite large between the two men.
But since that's not the case.
It's not the case. So the fact that he's even this close is kind of shocking to me. The fact that Trump is ahead is shocking to me. The policies that Donald Trump pushed, those America First policies that he implemented, they're supported by 75, 85% of the people. They know they're successful. They know they're popular. The question becomes the vehicle. And Donald Trump is someone who's going to go in there and rattle some cages. And I think at this point, when you see crime spiking, you see an open border, you see terrorists coming across that southern border, you see an economy in shambles, gas prices high, grocery prices high, wars in the world breaking out. You realize that didn't happen under the previous administration. And the unique nature of this upcoming election, where two people are going to run against each other, where they're comparing their records as president. It's not like one was a governor, right? And one was a senator and say, hey, I promise if you'll let me, I'll do this. They both have a body of work serving in a term as president. And when you compare the two records, my goodness, I think Trump is really going to energize a lot of folks to get out there and say, look, you may not like the tweets. Boy, we may not like it personally, but his policies, they're way better for me and my family and offer us opportunities we'll never get with Democrat control.
Hogan Gidley, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. I encourage people to check out America First Policy Institute to learn more about what Hogan has been talking about. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you.
Anytime. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hogan Gidley, he is their senior advisor for communications. He also served as the former principal deputy press secretary for the Trump administration, and he was the national press secretary for the Trump campaign in 2020.